Hey everybody, today we're going to take a look at this Whirlpool dryer. My wife told me what used to take about 60 minutes is taking longer and longer over the last couple of years. So today I'm going to show you why this happens, how easy it is to fix, get it running like new again. We're going to jump right into this. Let's get started. There are many minor variations to these front-loaded dryers, but mine is model Whiskey Golf Delta 75 Hotel Echo Foxtrot Whiskey 0. Of course, a problem that many people have is the exhaust vent and hose being clogged. Obviously, this should be inspected first. On mine, it's a new vent and hose, and we could see here that it is absolutely clean with no obstruction in it. That said, we're still going to go through the cleaning of both of these just for completeness. I'll pull the filter first, and of course, if this screen were damaged, it would introduce all sorts of problems into the dryer. This isn't damaged, but it isn't collecting a lot on it either. So we're going to take an orthoscopic camera and have a look inside. As the camera makes its way through this area, we could see a terrible amount of buildup accumulating in here that ultimately will lead to problems with airflow. That's the fan right there where it's all collecting on that side. And on this side, as it comes down, it's all collecting on this metal piece here, this manifold. So things are looking bad inside here. And that's from what we could see here on the surface. So before we begin, we'll disconnect power because none of this is worth dying over. I only have 120 volts because mine is a gas dryer. That said, because I'm pulling and working on the dryer and stepping around here, I'm going to shut off the gas line in case I accidentally rip it out or damage it. I don't want a gas leak. So just to be safe, I shut it off. There are units with a separate bottom panel which may allow you to clean out this bottom portion without removing the top or front of the dryer, but consider to clean it effectively, you may want to remove the top and front of the dryer anyway, even if you can separately remove that bottom panel. Mine happens to be on a pedestal, which makes the 4 bottom screws easy to get to because they're not seated right on the floor. You could just open up the drawer to access them. So we'll kick things off by removing these 2 screws on the top back cover seen over here and over here. This will be a 5/16 socket. These 2 screws are the only 5/16 screws that will have to be dealt with on this dryer during this procedure. Gently pull the cover back and up from the rear and then back to lift it off, then finding a safe place to store it. Now's a good time to look at the belt and rotate this drum 360 degrees. If you see the belt is damaged in any way, order one now. We need to disconnect this mount for the electronics next. There are 2 screws here and here to remove this board and move it out of the way using a 1/4-inch socket. All the rest of the screws that we'll come across during this procedure will use this 1/4-inch socket, except for 2 Phillips screws that we'll come across later. This board won't be removed from the unit, but as you can see, we can now move it out of the way to access cables below. Placing it back down now, I remove this connector by pushing this plastic piece back and lifting the connector out. That's the cable for the front panel. Now we'll remove this screw for the front panel. Remember that as you remove these screws, to keep them all in order so you know where they came from, even though most of these screws are 1/4 inch, they are different sizes, different lengths, so they should go back in the same spot they were removed from. Now we'll gently lift that control panel forward and out, making sure that one cable comes through that hole and doesn't get stuck, finding a safe place to store it. Moving the circuit board out of the way, we see another connector that makes its way down to the filter area. We want to disconnect this connector now, which I can't do with one hand. Through the magic of editing, it's now disconnected, so we can continue. Note that there are 3 screws up top holding in the front panel, 4 on the bottom. The first one all the way on the left will be completely removed. The second one will be loosened just several turns. Good enough. The third one also loosened just several turns. Good enough. And finally, the fourth one all the way on the right will be completely removed. Now, a Phillips screwdriver will be used to disconnect the front panel from the filter assembly here behind it. We see there are 2 screws holding it in. The two outer screws up top will now be removed. And finally, the last screw holding everything in, the middle screw up top, is removed. These two little hooks over here and over here are providing some stability. We've now removed the 3 top screws, loosened or removed the 4 bottom screws, and the 2 screws securing in the filter. The cable here has been disconnected previously. So while it's balanced on here and here, I would generally open this door to get my hand under it, but it would hit the camera when I would pull it back. So what I'm going to do is keep it closed, which I don't recommend other people do, but I'm going to lift it up and off and make sure that cable doesn't get stuck. So I'm going to take a moment here, make sure it's fully out. Now everything is disconnected, and put this in a safe place. These 2 screws on the bottom are immediately removed. As pieces start coming off, we can see massive amounts of dirt inside the dryer. Right over here, pet hair and dirt and lint is just caked up everywhere in this area. Some's already fallen into this drawer over here. This metal cover is a little different than what I've seen, and what you're about to see is a lesson in how not to remove this metal cover, but I will be showing later the correct way to move it, removing the filter assembly first. I'm removing these 3 screws now that secures it, but definitely do not do this until that plastic piece is removed from inside the dryer. That last screw does have to be removed, as it does connect this piece to the filter assembly. Then I moved this bracket out of the way to lower it enough. I should have in fact removed it. Again, I'll be revisiting this section for disassembly when all the bolts are clean and visible. And we can see there's all sorts of nastiness in here. It's absolutely terrible. It's all caked up around here, around the motor. We're going to clean all this out like new. Enough of this builds up and impedes the airflow, especially in humid environments. It just cakes up more and more. Every edge of these pieces of metal is like razor blades, so you got to be careful. And what's this?
Did you find your earring?
No, it's the O-ring for the shovel head carburetor. I'll remove this 1 screw now that holds in the fan shroud. It just needs to be contorted out on the other side to remove it from that tab. Being careful not to break it. And we can see again a large buildup around the seals with dirt and lint. I'm going to start to vacuum up some of this because it's just too nasty just to get all this large lint and dirt out of the way. So we're going to run through really quick with the vacuum cleaner before we continue. Having a look through the fan, we get a clear shot of the pipe that goes to the back. If this area is not obstructed, we're going to look in the back later to confirm that there's no obstruction here. This piece is the piece that should have been removed before that metal shroud, making it easier to remove that shroud. We're going to remove it now. There are 2 screws holding it in. And they're using that 1/4 inch socket to remove them right here. As I lift this piece up, just look at the volume of crap that comes out. And all that just fell onto the bottom there. Look at all that. That's unbelievable. Didn't even see any of that accumulating there. I've got a connector right over here that goes to the filter assembly. I'm going to disconnect that now by squeezing these tabs on the side, removing it. We're going to take these pieces outside and start cleaning them individually. It almost looks like insulation here. It's packed so tightly, but all of this is lint and dirt. Also, it's holding these 2 pieces together. So we're going to remove just enough here with the vacuum cleaner, and we're going to see if we can remove enough to separate these 2 pieces to clean it completely. I'm using a stiff plastic bristle brush to aid in the cleaning. Eventually enough dirt has been removed that I could split the 2 halves, exposing even more dirt. And this brush has a smaller brush on the other end that gets into really tight spaces, so I'm cleaning all those individual areas now. It makes you wonder, as you keep removing all this stuff, all this dirt, you see how this functions in any capacity at all. But now with enough removed, I blow it out with compressed air, or you could use canned air, or you could just keep hitting it with a brush till it's all gone. Depends on the tools you have at your disposal. And you can see these 2 pieces fit together by these 2 plastic guides. There's nothing that actually locks them in together. They just get held together like that. They were just held by dirt only. The ends of the seals have come loose. I'll deal with that shortly. But for now, we'll continue cleaning our other parts, removing all this dust from the seals. I found that air was also effective at removing the dust that was caught in that foam rubber. This piece took the most work. It was no surprise. It was really caked in. I vacuumed all the big chunks out as much as I could from both sides. And then once that was completed, I took that plastic bristle brush and loosened as much as I could, getting into those crevices right there, and then vacuumed that up. But then we still had a lot of nasty debris that just got stuck there over the years. So I used a hose to wash everything out to make sure it was perfectly clean and nothing would bind to it with humidity later. And now we have it perfectly clean. We'll let that dry. It's ready for assembly. Now we bring our attention to cleaning the machine itself and just vacuuming up some of the dust that dropped here from removing these parts. With all the really bad stuff gone, eventually I'll move to the Dyson with better attachments that could get to hard to reach areas. I'm going to take a minute now to open the flap and obstruct it because mine is a heavy metal flap. That way there's no resistance here, and I'm going to close the cover on it. I don't need to blow my vent out because it was already clean, but I'm doing it for the video, so I'm blowing compressed air into that vent through the dryer. That way I could clean out everything. But while I'm here, I have a fan pointed towards the door, and wearing a mask, I'm just cleaning everything here with compressed air. If you could roll your dryer outside the house, and you have a mask and compressed air, this would be a lot quicker than using a vacuum cleaner and a brush. Not only was I able to clean out the fan area, but all the internals of the dryer was cleaned out in this manner very quickly, with all the dust and debris being blown out the side of the house. Notice the extra time I'm taking to make sure that the impellers on the fan are perfectly clean and all the dust is removed from them. That evening I wanted to repair the filter assembly seal ends that started to peel off. I had some black RTV on hand and I know it's good for high temp, so I just applied a little and then pushed them right back on, and I'll let that sit there for the night and it'll dry, and that'll be good enough to hold the ends back on. Continuing with cleaning the internals, I'm loosening the pipe on the back of the dryer. We're going to have a look and check for obstructions and clean as necessary. These flex hoses are fragile, so care should be taken. As we take our first look inside, we see that there is no obstruction whatsoever, just a little bit of residue on the walls of the pipe, and we could see all the way to the end of that manifold where the fan is. However, I'm going to use one of those cleaning kits and those extensions and just clean it out for the video, always going in a clockwise motion, turning while I clean out everything. And a view from the fan shows that brush comes all the way up to the fan shroud, so we know that we're good all the way through. And this is what's left, those little particles of dust to blow out on first use. The hose and pipe going through the house should be checked and cleaned in the same manner. We know mine is good, so I'm going to put that hose back on and secure it tightly. The first piece to go back on, the fan cover says this side out on it and has a notch right here that will fit in the notch on this piece over here. Slid into that notch, we press down and line up the screw hole, placing a screw in. We tighten it down, and remember that as we tighten these screws down, it's going into sheet metal, so just snug them. Don't tighten them really tight or they'll strip. A quick montage of before and after with compressed air. You could see it really comes out like new, but again, you can do this with a vacuum cleaner and a brush if you have the right attachments to get in there. This is what we're really looking for. Everything's been cleaned out of this dryer. It's going to function a lot better than it used to. All these recesses, the fan shroud, every area, the fan blades are all cleaned out, and it'll operate much more efficiently than it did previously. If you feel like you can't get it clean doing the vacuum cleaner method, there is a way by removing the drum, but that's for another video. This piece should have been removed as part of the initial deinstallation, so I'm going to remove it now so we can install everything properly. With the filter assembly above not installed and the piece on the bottom removed, this could be laid perfectly onto this seal, just like that, aligning the two holes up top that mount it. Right there. So now I'll place in the screws for the two holes up top. And then snug them down gently with the ratchet. bottom bracket will now be reintroduced, hooking around this piece first, then sliding in between the grooves on the bottom, showing from the side angle for a better view. First it hooks around on an angle, slides between those grooves and sits like that. I put a screw through the hole and then through the bracket in the rear and then snug it down. I'm going to support the bracket as I tighten to make sure it stays straight once it starts tightening down. The filter assembly will now be reinstalled, first guiding this electrical cable through this hole. The filter assembly will sit in that duct from the piece we just installed, making sure none of that insulation gets bent or damaged. It seats perfectly into place, aligning up this first hole that goes through that metal. I install a screw. This is not going to be tightened down. I'm just going to take the ratchet and give it a couple turns only so it doesn't fall out. I still want it to be able to move around a bit. I have those two longer screws from the filter assembly that'll now be installed from within the drum outward, and I install them one at a time, not tightening them down till both of them are in so I can line everything up. When the second one goes in, this one gets tightened down, and once this one is tightened down, I'll make my way back to the first screw and tighten that one down as well. Now this loosely fit screw can be tightened down, just snug, not too tight. Finally, this connector is reconnected. It's keyed, so it only fits one way. Everything on this portion is now all back together, clean and looking good. But what I'd like to do is take a minute to just revisit this portion's disassembly and go through the correct steps in the correct order on a clean machine where it's easy to see everything. First, I'll remove this screw going through the metal piece and the filter assembly. Then I'll remove the two screws in the drum holding in the filter assembly. The connector will be disconnected, filter assembly removed from the dryer. This lower bracket will be unscrewed and removed from the dryer. These two screws will be unscrewed, all the while supporting this piece because there's nothing holding it in anymore. Then it's lifted straight back and off the blower assembly and out of the dryer. Quick before and after inside, how it looked before with everything assembled, with everything collected inside there. And now and after, everything cleaned inside, looking brand new. Let's continue. The filter itself has a lot of debris covering up surface area. You can see right here that's going to impede airflow. So what we're going to do is we're going to just blast this out with a hose to get this filter really clean, increasing the overall efficiency of the machine. And it came out really nice. We're just going to leave that to dry overnight and come back to it. I'm going to clean up this front cover now before reassembly. This is all that has collected on the inside. A quick vacuum and a wipe down with a rag is all that is needed. The front panel is lined up with the machine, and the first thing I want to do is guide that cable back through where it came from. Take my time, and we can see right here where the cable comes into the top of the unit. With the door open, I'll guide the front cover onto the two small hooks on the front of the machine, seating the front cover into place and allowing it to hang. Just like that. Closing the door, and now checking to make sure that it's seated on those two outer hooks properly. It is, so I proceed. Immediately, I'm going to fit the top three screws into position. I'm not going to tighten down any of the screws just yet. They're all going to be loosely fit. The top three are done first to ensure the cover is not able to fall with the screws in place. Now it's safe to continue. Continuing on, I'll be adding the four bottom screws. Again, I won't be tightening these screws in. They'll just be loosely fit. Now opening the front door, we'll be adding the two Phillips screws to secure the filter assembly. The first one will be loosely fit, and the second one will be installed and then snugged down. Coming back to the first one, this one will then be snugged down, at which point we'll be revisiting every screw starting from the top and snugging them down. Again, remember, not too tight as it can strip out the sheet metal. Now we're on the bottom, snugging down the four screws, the bottom working our way from the middle outward, completing the task of tightening down the front cover. I close the pedestal drawer now, as I no longer need access, and give a quick dusting to the top portion of the cover before proceeding. We install the front panel now, guiding this cable through the circular hole first, pulling the slack through, and when the panel is situated just right, it drops into place just like that. The front panel is secured on both sides with a screw. It'll be installed now, remembering that it is going through plastic and metal, so just snug it down, don't tighten it, or it will break. This connector from a previous step will now be reconnected. It is keyed, as we see here, so it only goes in one direction, pushing it together and making sure that it is fully connected, just like that. The circuit board mount is lifted and the cable from the front panel goes through this hole. The circuit board mount is then lowered into position, matching up the hole for the screw. The screw is then inserted and snugged down. The other side of the circuit board mount is aligned, the screw is inserted and snugged down as well. Finally, the cable for the front panel is reconnected to the circuit board right over here, pushed straight down and snapped into place. The mount is given a final check and everything's tight. We give one last inspection to the top side of the dryer before we close it up. Everything on this front panel looks good. All of our cables are connected. I do see some dust here on both ends that I'm going to clean up with a towel, but that's it. We're ready to close it. Holes can be seen in the front cover that lines up to pins on the front panel. We'll align them now as we place the front cover on the top of the unit. They align just like that, but we'll lay it down flat, and once it's laid down flat, it can simply be pushed forward into position, locking into place. We'll be using our 5/16 socket for these two screws on the back cover, securing them now. And with this screw ending the assembly of the unit. Finally, taking a look at the top cover seam just to make sure everything's straight and aligned, that the cover went on correctly. For my gas unit, I'll be doing an inspection on my gas line to make sure it wasn't kinked or damaged or otherwise, and then I will open up the valve. It's a good idea to wait a few minutes to make sure there's no smell of gas, though I do have a gas detector. Most people don't have that. Then I'll plug in the AC. Mine is low voltage because it's gas. And finally, we will install the cleaned filter, completing this project. The vacuum was half filled on this top canister, as well as fully filled and compacted on this bottom canister, with garbage impeding the flow of this dryer. We'll give the dryer a test run and blow out any of the residual dust and lint that was scraped out during the cleaning. Just a regular run, and as we see the vent open up, all sorts of crap just blows out. We'll take a closer look at that in slow motion. All the dust and lint and what have you that was scraped out during the cleaning is now removed. The operation seems normal, there are no noises, everything seems to be functioning correctly. Hot air coming out the vents, little pieces of lint here and there as it cleans itself out, but everything seems to be running fine. So we can now try with clothing, as running it empty brought the sensor down from 70 minutes to 1 minute because it detected everything was dry in the dryer. And that concludes this video on the comprehensive cleaning of this Whirlpool dryer to restore its efficiency. I hope you found this video enjoyable, entertaining, and informative. Do me a favor, hit that like button down below, helps me out a lot when you do, and hit that subscribe button to be notified about more videos like this when they come out. When the next video comes out in this series, a link will be posted in the top right corner. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Timed that perfectly.
Thanks for watching. Would you like to reply?